The experts come across an old photograph from 1890 showing 3 children. When they zoom in, they are taken aback. What you are about to witness challenges all reason. But before you proceed, if you enjoy historical finds that will astonish you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Give this video a thumbs up if you think there are still unsolved enigmas waiting to be uncovered. In October 2023, a pair of Boston collectors stumbled upon something that would reshape their perspective on 19th century photography. Emma Richardson and Jake Sullivan had gone to a standard auction for the Whitmore family estate, hoping to find vintage photo albums for their antique shop. Lot Tudor 47 appeared unremarkable 6 Victorian-era family albums priced at $350. Yet while going through their purchase, they came across an unexpected item. A dark leather album with faded gold lettering that said, "Steen, Mary's Children's Home, 1888. As they opened it, the pages creaked, exposing sepia-toned pictures of orphanage children. The youngsters stood in neat rows clad in plain uniforms, their expressions serious, as was customary for photography in that period. These images are typical of 19th century charitable institutions, Emma remarked as she flipped through the pages. She had encountered countless similar photos before, orphaned kids documented for administrative purposes or fundraising drives. But on page 23, something grabbed her focus. A group shot displayed about 40 children lined up in front of a brick building. At first glance, the photo seemed ordinary, yet something in the background unsettled her. Looking closer, she noticed one child in the back wearing a strangely contemporary expression. "Jake, come look at this child in the rear," Emma said, indicating the figure. "His stance and demeanor, they don't match the period." Jake moved in for a better look. The boy in question had an informal, relaxed grin, a stark contrast to the stiff solemnity of the others. His gaze seemed fixed directly on the camera with a self-assurance uncommon for institutionalized kids in 1888. "It's odd," Jake admitted. "But maybe he was just a naturally photogenic child." Still, Emma couldn't let go of the notion that there was more to it. The quest for answers had begun. Emma and Jake chose to digitize the photograph at high resolution for a closer inspection. On their computer, they could blow up the image and scrutinize every detail with pinpoint accuracy. What they uncovered left them baffled. The child who had drawn their attention not only had an out-of-place expression, but was also holding something in his hand that clearly didn't fit 1888. What seemed to be a small, rectangular item resembling a contemporary device. "This can't be real," Jake muttered while tweaking the image contrast. "Is that a phone?" Emma examined the object carefully. It was petite, rectangular, and appeared to have a glossy, smooth surface. Even though the 1888 photo's quality didn't allow for perfect clarity, the shape was unmistakably modern. "It can't be a phone," Emma reasoned. "But it's definitely not something from the 19th century. They hunted for plausible explanations. It might be a small photographic plate, a pocket mirror, or perhaps a flaw from the developing process." Yet the more they studied the image, the more they felt the object was anachronistic. They resolved to consult specialists in historical photography. Dr. Robert Chen, a Harvard professor of photography history, agreed to look at the image. "The photograph is genuine to the era," Dr. Chen confirmed after a thorough analysis. "The materials, the development method, the paper type, everything aligns with 1888. There's no indication of later digital tampering." "But what about the item the child is holding?" Emma asked. Dr. Chen furrowed his brow. "It's peculiar. I can't identify what it might be in the context of that time. However, I should note that old photos sometimes capture objects that look anachronistic because of image quality or lighting effects. Still, His explanation didn't fully reassure Emma and Jake. They decided to dig deeper into St. Mary's Orphanage to grasp the photo's background. The orphanage inquiry would uncover secrets hidden for over a century. Emma and Jake went to the Boston Historical Archives to research St. Mary's Children's Home. The archivist, Margaret Foster, gave them a box of documents tied to the orphanage. St. Mary's operated between 1875 and 1923, Foster explained. It was a Catholic institution that mainly housed orphaned and abandoned kids from the Boston area. The records gave basic facts. The orphanage held between 80 and 120 children at any time, was managed by the Sisters of Charity, and got funding from private donations and municipal money. But as they reviewed the documents more carefully, Emma found something alarming. An 1889 inspection report noted irregularities in children's records and mismatches in the number of reported residents versus those seen during visits. What kind of irregularities? Jake asked. Emma read aloud. During the inspection of March 15, 1889, about 45 children were observed in the dining hall. Yet official records indicated only 38 residents. When questioned about this gap, the Mother Superior explained that some children were visiting potential adoptive families. Another document from 1890 reported complaints from families claiming that children adopted from St. Mary's displayed strange and inexplicable behaviors. One father wrote, "My adopted son seems to know things that a child his age shouldn't know, especially about current events and technologies." "That's odd," Jake commented. How could an orphan child from 1890 know about technologies of that time? The inquiry grew more intriguing when they came across the personal diary of Sister Catherine Ali, who had run the orphanage from 1885 to 1895. "Some of our children are different," she had written in 1888. "They possess knowledge and behaviors that don't match their upbringing here. It's as if they had lived previous, more complex lives." Emma and Jake exchanged glances, as she suggesting that some children weren't what they seemed. They kept reading. "The child Thomas particularly disturbs me. He occasionally speaks of flying machines and lights that work without fire. When I ask him where he learned these things, he says he remembers them from before." The description matched the child in the photograph who had originally caught their attention. Dr. Foster directed them to a special archive section containing the orphanage's medical records. These documents were in better shape and offered more detailed information about daily life at St. Mary's. The orphanage doctor, Dr. William Hartwell, had kept meticulous health records, but his notes revealed troubling observations. Patient Thomas Mackenzie, estimated age 8 years. Emma read from an 1888 medical file, shows normal physical development, but extraordinarily advanced cognitive knowledge. Describes medical procedures not taught in elementary institutions. Jake found another equally disturbing file. Patient Mary Sullivan, age 10 years. During examination described internal anatomical details with precision that only someone with advanced medical education could know. When asked about the origin of this knowledge, claimed to remember it from her previous family. Dr. Hartwell had documented a dozen children with similar traits between 1887 and 1891. All showed exceptional intelligence, anachronistic knowledge, and an understanding of the world beyond their formal schooling. "I have observed that these particular children seem to adapt more quickly to new situations and show unusual resistance to common illnesses," the doctor had written. "It's as if they possessed previous experiences that prepared them for institutional life." Even more disturbing, Dr. Hartwell had noted that these special children often vanished without explanation. His records showed that of the 12 children with exceptional traits, only 3 had been formally adopted. The other 9 had simply stopped appearing in records with no documentation of transfer or adoption. Thomas Mackenzie no longer resides at the institution as of October 20, 1890. The doctor had noted, "There are no adoption or transfer records. Sister O'Malley indicates that family came for him, but I cannot locate corresponding documentation." Emma and Jake began to suspect that something more intricate was unfolding at St. Mary's. The special children seemed to have mysterious origins and equally mysterious departures. "Do you think these children were different in some way?" Jake asked. Emma studied the original photograph again. "Or maybe someone placed them there intentionally." Emma and Jake decided to visit the site, where St. Mary's Children's Home had once stood. The building had been torn down in 1925, but municipal records pinpointed its exact location in Boston's North End. The area was now occupied by a modern condominium complex, but they found a small commemorative plaque, briefly mentioning the orphanage's existence. An elderly local resident, Michael O'Brien, approached as they examined the plaque. "My grandfather lived on this street when the orphanage was still here," O'Brien said. "He always told strange stories about that place." Emma and Jake were instantly intrigued. "What kind of stories?" "He said he occasionally saw children entering and leaving the building at odd hours. Children who didn't seem to dress like the others, and that sometimes there were lights in the windows after everyone was supposed to be sleeping." O'Brien invited them to his house to show them some family documents. His grandfather had been a merchant in the area and kept detailed records of neighborhood happenings. "Here it is," O'Brien said, showing an 1889 diary. "September 15th. Again, I saw unknown children near the orphanage after nightfall. They wore clothes I don't recognize and seemed to be waiting for something or someone." Another entry read, "The orphanage children I see during the day are different from those who occasionally appear at night. The nocturnal ones seem more aware of their surroundings and less institutional in their behavior." Jake asked if there were more records. O'Brien brought out a box of family papers that included correspondence between his grandfather and other area merchants. An 1890 letter between local merchants mentioned orphanage suppliers report inconsistent orders. Some months they request supplies for 120 children, other months for only 80 without clear explanation of the variations. Emma began to develop a theory. What if some of the children weren't permanent residents? What if they came from somewhere else temporarily? But from where? Jake asked. And why? The answers to those questions would require deeper investigation into the mysteries surrounding St. Mary's. Through genealogical records, Emma and Jake managed to locate descendants of some children who had lived at St. Mary's. The first family they contacted was Margaret Sullivan Chen, great-granddaughter of Mary Sullivan, one of the girls mentioned in Dr. Hartwell's medical records. "My great-grandmother always told strange stories about her years at the orphanage," Margaret said during their meeting at a Cambridge cafe. She spoke of special visitors who occasionally appeared to help the children. Emma showed the photograph that had sparked their investigation. Margaret studied it carefully. "My great-grandmother is in this photo," she said, pointing to a girl in the second row. "But she always said there were other children at the orphanage who didn't appear in the official photographs." "What do you mean by that?" Jake asked. According to her, there were children who came for short periods, usually when there were problems or emergencies. These children seemed to know exactly what to do to help, as if they had been there before. Margaret shared more details from family stories. "My great-grandmother said that during an influenza epidemic in 1889, several children appeared who knew medical care techniques that the sisters didn't know. They helped save many lives, but disappeared as soon as the crisis passed. The second family provided equally intriguing information. Robert Mackenzie, descendant of Thomas Mackenzie, the child from the medical files, had family documents passed down through generations. My great-great-grandfather kept a simple diary after leaving the orphanage, Robert explained. He wrote about his memories of St. Mary's, including details about children who appeared during emergencies. Thomas Mackenzie's diary, written as an adult in 1920, contained specific memories. I remember children who arrived during difficult nights. They knew things we didn't know, like methods to keep food fresh longer or techniques to heat the dormitories more efficiently. When we asked where they came from, they said they were from other institutions, but never specified which ones. The third family provided the most significant piece of the puzzle. Jennifer O'Malley Walsh was a descendant of Sister Catherine Alley and had access to the nun's personal documents that had never been officially archived. My great-great-grandmother wrote private letters to her sister about events at the orphanage. Jennifer explained, these letters were never intended for official records, so they're more honest about what really occurred. An 1888 letter revealed, Dear Sister, I must tell you about the special children who occasionally appear here. They come without official documentation, but always during moments when we need them most. It's as if someone knew exactly when to send them. Another letter described, these children not only possess advanced knowledge, but seem to understand our needs before we express them. It's as if they had studied our situation in detail before arriving. With all the evidence gathered, Emma and Jake began developing a theory about what had really occurred at St. Mary's Children's Home. They met with Dr. Robert Chen from Harvard to discuss their findings. The patterns are consistent, Emma explained, showing a timeline they had created. Every time the orphanage faced a crisis, epidemics, food shortages, financial problems, children appeared with specific knowledge to solve those problems. Jake added, and these children always disappeared once the crisis passed without leaving traces in official records. Dr. Chen studied the evidence. It's an extraordinary situation. It suggests some kind of organized program to provide specific help to the orphanage. But who could have organized something like that? Emma asked, and how did they know exactly when and what kind of help was needed? Perhaps there was a network of institutions that shared resources and knowledge. Dr. Chen suggested, philanthropic organizations of the era sometimes operated in a coordinated manner. However, their additional research revealed no evidence of such a network. No other institution in the area reported similar patterns, and there were no records of formal communication between St. Mary's and other orphanages. Emma proposed a different theory. What if there was a secret organization dedicated specifically to helping St. Mary's? Maybe a group of wealthy benefactors who train children for specific missions. That would explain the specialized knowledge, Jake admitted. But why the secrecy? And why only St. Mary's? Their investigation of financial records revealed something interesting between 1887 and 1892. The orphanage had received significant anonymous donations that always arrived just before or after the crisis they had identified. Someone was monitoring the orphanage situation very closely, Emma concluded. Close enough to know exactly when and what kind of help to send. Dr. Chen suggested deeper investigation. You should examine records from other institutions of the era to see if there are similar patterns, and perhaps investigate wealthy Boston families who might have had the resources to organize such a program. Their theory was taking shape. An organized and well-funded group had operated in secret to provide specific help to St. Mary's using specially trained children for short-term missions. Emma and Jake expanded their investigation to examine records from other Boston charitable institutions during the same period. They visited archives of various orphanages, hospitals, and schools to look for similar patterns. Their findings were revealing. Boston Children's Hospital had reported the occasional appearance of young volunteer assistants during medical emergencies between 1888 and 1893. These young people showed advanced medical knowledge, but disappeared without leaving employment records. The Industrial School for Girls had documented visits from exchange students who taught more efficient sewing and cooking techniques, but there were no records of which institutions sent them. "It's a pattern," Jake observed. Someone was sending specifically trained young people to institutions that needed help. Their investigation of wealthy Boston families led them to the records of the New England Philanthropic Society, a private organization that coordinated charitable efforts among the region's wealthiest families. In the Society's archives, they found references to a specialized assistance program directed by an anonymous committee of benefactors. The program apparently selected and trained young people to provide specific help to needy institutions. The Specialized Assistance Program has demonstrated remarkable efficacy in resolving institutional crises. Emma read from an 1891 report. Program participants receive intensive training in specific skills before being assigned to short-term missions. Jake found more details. Participants are selected for their exceptional intelligence and adaptability. Training includes accelerated education in basic medicine, food preservation techniques, teaching methods, and crisis management. The program apparently operated from a private property outside Boston, but specific location records had been redacted from the documents. "This explains everything," Emma said. "The special children at St. Mary's were participants in this secret training program. Dr. Foster, who had been helping them with the investigation, provided the final historical context. During the 1880s and 1890s, there was a movement among Boston's wealthy families to professionalize charity. They believed traditional philanthropy was inefficient and sought more scientific methods to help the poor. The Specialized Assistance Program would have been the result of that philosophy," she explained. Instead of simply donating money, they were investing in training people, specifically to solve institutional problems. Emma and Jake finally managed to locate the property where the Specialized Assistance Program had operated. Land records indicated it had belonged to the Thornton family, one of Boston's wealthiest dynasties in the 19th century. The property, now a state park, still contained the foundations of several buildings that had been demolished in the 1920s. With permission from park authorities, they conducted a limited archaeological excavation. They found physical evidence of the program, buried educational materials, including advanced medical textbooks, food preservation technique manuals, and teaching method guides, all dated between 1885 and 1895. More significantly, they found photographs of the program in operation. The images showed young people of similar ages to the St. Mary's children participating in intensive training, medical classes, cooking technique practice, problem-solving exercises. "Here it is," Jake said, pointing to a photograph showing approximately 20 young people posing in front of a training building. "These are the special children from St. Mary's." Emma recognized several faces from the orphanage photographs. They weren't ordinary orphans. They were students in a philanthropic training program. The final documents they found revealed the program's complete structure. Participants were selected from regional orphanages for their exceptional intelligence, taken to the training center for periods of 6 months to 2 years, and then graduated to be placed in specific missions. Program graduates will be temporarily inserted into institutions facing specific crises. Emma read from a program manual. Their specialized training will allow them to provide effective solutions, while maintaining their cover as ordinary residents. Once the mission is completed, graduates will be relocated to carefully selected adoptive families or return to the program for additional training. The program had operated successfully for approximately a decade before being discontinued in 1895. Records indicated that changes in child labor laws and increased public scrutiny had made the program unviable for continued operations. "It's brilliant," Jake admitted. They used the existing orphanage infrastructure to hide a specialized crisis worker training program. Emma studied the original St. Mary's photograph again, and the child with the strange object in his hand. It was probably some kind of tool or instrument he had learned to use during his training. The investigation had revealed not a supernatural mystery, but an innovative social program that had operated secretly during the American Gilded Age. Emma and Jake presented their findings to the Boston Historical Society at a conference that attracted historians, genealogists, and descendants of families connected to St. Mary's. Their research had revealed a previously unknown chapter in the history of American philanthropy. The Specialized Assistance Program represents an early experiment in what we now call evidence-based philanthropy. Emma explained during her presentation. Instead of traditional charity, these wealthy families invested in creating systematic solutions to social problems. Dr. Foster added historical context. This program anticipated by decades modern approaches to social work and crisis management. The participants were essentially specialized social workers trained a century before that profession was formalized. Descendants of the involved families reacted with a mixture of pride and surprise. Margaret Sullivan Chen commented, "Now I understand why my great-grandmother always insisted that her time at St. Mary's had been special. She wasn't just an orphan. She was part of an innovative program." The investigation also revealed the fate of many program participants. Records showed that after completing their missions, most had been placed with carefully selected adoptive families, many of whom were middle-class families that valued education. Many of these children grew up to become leaders in their communities. Jake explained, doctors, teachers, social workers, reformers. The program not only solved immediate crises, but created a generation of civic leaders. Dr. Robert Chen from Harvard announced he would establish a research program to study the Specialized Assistance Program's methods more thoroughly. The training approaches they developed could have modern applications in disaster response preparation and humanitarian work. Emma and Jake donated all their photographs and documents to the Smithsonian, where an exhibition on philanthropic innovation in 19th century America was established. The original St. Mary's photograph became the centerpiece of the exhibition. This research reminds us that history is full of innovators who operated outside traditional systems. Emma reflected during the exhibition's opening. The Specialized Assistance Program was decades ahead of its time. Jake added, and it shows us that sometimes historical mysteries have extraordinary, but completely earthly explanations. The photograph that had started their investigation now hung in the museum with a new explanatory plaque. St. Mary's Children's Home, 1888. This image documents both regular orphanage residents and participants in the Specialized Assistance Program, an innovative philanthropic experiment that trained young people to solve institutional crises. The child with the mysterious object had been identified as Thomas Mackenzie, who had completed specialized medical training and had been sent to St. Mary's during an influenza epidemic. The object in his hand was a primitive medical instrument he had learned to use during his training. The Satine. Mary's story had ended not as an unsolved mystery, but as testimony to the innovation and dedication of philanthropists who had worked in secret to improve the lives of society's most vulnerable. Their legacy lived on in the generations of descendants who continued public service work and in the lessons their methods provided for modern humanitarian workers.